Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Jenny. Today's video is a comparison of the new and the old Wet n Wild Comfort Zone palettes. So today may be a little bit short because I'm going to do some swatches and I'm just going to talk. I did do the same eye look using both of these palettes. This eye is the old palette and this eye is the new palette. So you can compare and see that they look very similar. So first I'm just going to talk about the obvious differences. So the obvious differences are that these pans are smaller and they have added 2 matte shadows to this palette, whereas the old was just all shimmer and they were much larger. So in the new palette, they've taken the new packaging that they did with the other palettes, like the new Modern Renaissance dupe and stuff like that. They have the new sleek packaging, and then they did add the 2 new mattes. The 2 mattes in this palette are actually really nice. This shade is absolutely gorgeous. It's my favorite shade of the entire palette. I love the way that shade looks on the eyes, and this is just a really nice traditional matte warm shade. So to show you the colors that I used, I'm going to use this palette and just point to the colors, but just know that if I said I used this shade, on the other eye I used the counterpart to it because I don't want to say this one and then that one and this one and that one. That'll just be too long. First, I used the matte Brulee shade from Wet n Wild because there isn't a light all over the lid shade. And then in the crease, I used both of these matte shades on both eyes. Since the other palette doesn't have any mattes, I went ahead and used both mattes on both eyes. Then I went ahead and took this brown shade on the outer V. I took the kind of pinky shade on the lid. I used this one as liner. I put this in the inner corner and on the brow bone. And I put these 2 on the lower lash line. Surprisingly, I like the old formula of these shimmers better than the new one. I feel like the old ones kind of pack more of a punch. And the like kind of pinky shade that I used all over the lid, I feel like this one has a lot more shine to it than the new one. And wear time, they both wear about the same, but where the old ones have more pigment and a little more pop to them, they tend to wear nicer throughout the day than these new ones do. Now they do wear nice throughout the day, they don't really crease or anything like that, but I do notice that the shimmers kind of fade a little bit, so in order to make them last a little longer, I do use a glitter glue with them most of the time. I didn't today, but most of the time, if I am going to be wearing them for a very long time throughout the day, I will wear a glitter glue with the shimmer shades. So I'm going to swatch them side by side for you just so you can kind of see the differences, because within the shades there are some shade differences even though they're supposed to be the same color, and you can kind of see the pigmentation differences within them. I don't know that you're going to be able to see them on camera, but I can definitely see them in person. I'm going to go ahead and do that for you now. So this is the more neutral side of the palette, and the top colors of each shade is the old palette, and then the bottom one is the new palette. So starting with the light shade, as you can see, I don't know if you can even see that, the top one, which is the old one, is more like yellowy in tone, and it is very bright compared to the other one that's more of a satin finish instead of a shimmer finish. And then the more pinky shade, the old one is more kind of golden pink, whereas the new one is more like bronzy pink. You can kind of tell the difference where this one is a lot darker in tone than this one. Then the bronzy one is just better pigment in the old one. They're basically the same shade, but this one has a little bit better pigment than the old or the new one. And then these 2 are about the same, honestly. The new dark shade has a tiny bit more glitter in it than the old one, but overall they're about the same tone. This one's a little more purple than this one. This one's a little more brown. On to the more colorful row. Just like the other row, the top row is the old and the bottom row is the new. So as far as this taupe shade goes, the new one is a little bit more warm, a little more bronzy than the old one, which is more cool tone and taupe. The greens, like the light green, is basically the same color, and they do actually have the same pigmentation as you can see from the swatch. They look identical. Same with the dark green. The new one has less shimmer in it than the old green did, but overall tone is the same. And unfortunately, the pop shade that everyone loves from this, which is kind of like the MAC Blue Brown, the old one blows the new one out of the park. As you can see, it like barely even swatched. It barely has that duochrome in it, where the new one has that duochrome and it's beautiful. This new one you have to work with a lot to get the pigmentation to come out. So unfortunately, the new duochrome shade is just not great like the old one is. And here are the 2 mattes, just in case you were interested in what they looked like. One's just a nice warm orange, and the other one's like a berry mauve kind of color. I really love this color so much. So overall, if you have this old Comfort Zone palette and your shadows are still in good quality, they're not cracking and breaking and all that stuff, you don't need the new palette because these shimmers are, in my opinion, better than the new ones. But if you don't have it, and I think the Comfort Zone palette is a nice palette to have, especially now that there are 2 mattes in it. I think the mattes are a nice addition, but the mattes aren't enough to make me need to go out and buy a new one. Like if I didn't do it for review purposes, I wouldn't need to go buy the new one. But in my opinion, I think that this like berry shade down here is worth the $5.99 just for that shade, because I think that shade is kind of unique and beautiful. This one, I have like a million shades of orange, but this one I think is extremely unique, and I think it's really nice to have in this palette because that shade looks really nice with all of the other shades and tones in this palette. If you have the old palette, you do not need to run out and get this one, because as much as I enjoy this matte, if that matte shade isn't something that you're into, then it's just not even worth it. Just keep your old palette and use the mattes that you have, because that's the only downfall that this palette has, is that there are no mattes in it and it's an all shimmer palette. But if getting a all matte palette or just a handful of matte shadows to use with this palette doesn't bother you, then just stick with this one. This one is not needed if you already have this one. There's no difference, and what differences there are either are worse than this one or they're about the same. I know I'm rambling. There's no different. If you have this one, don't get this one. Unless you love this matte color like I do, because it's absolutely fantastic. So I know this video was short, but I wanted to show you the comparisons just in case you felt like you needed the new one, or you wanted to compare them or whatever. I went ahead and did this for you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, and if you would like to subscribe, please feel free, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys.